Hi, I'm John Newman with the Coquille Sword Group, and today we're going to be talking about the upper attitude of fencing. For the long sword, we call this Hasso no kamae, just Hasso for short. For the two swords, we call it Jodan no kamae. Jodan is literally high or upper level, just as Chudan is middle level. The upper attitude, Hasso, is a very aggressive attitude. As we talked about in the Chudan kata, it is one motion timing away from striking your opponent as opposed to the two motion timing of the middle attitude Chudan. And we use it quite a bit, right? Musashi sort of instructs us that anytime our spirit feels elevated, our kamae should elevate. And what does that mean? Basically, you can think of your spirit level as a combination of your level of drive and really your desire to push into a guy's space. This is a lot harder to sort of talk about in words, but once you start to play with it, it becomes really fairly clear. So we'll start off with the long sword, go to the short sword, and then go to the Nito Seho, the two sword work. Hasso no kamae with the long sword. So the Hasso position, the upper attitude, is just as much about how you go into it as what you can do from it. So we're going to start the position from Chudan. I'll show it from the side and then facing you. So in that same position, the left foot slightly back of the right foot, feet shoulder width apart. Potato cheese in good standing. We drive into that strong Chudan no kamae, right? So to go into Hasso, what I want to do is drive forward. Little step with my front foot. I extend my tip as though I'm cupping underneath the opponent's chin. I flick their chin back. Left foot comes up to the right. And the sword pulls back to my ear, right? The position is as though the tsuka is a telephone, I'm pulling it up. Hello, mushi, right? And answering it. Now, this position has a little less change in it than some of the other kamae do, with the sort of change in soke. If you watch Kazuya Soke do it now, his hand-to-ear position tends to be a little bit further back in this more retracted position. Now, as a general rule, you can tell a little bit about the fencing styles, how they apply their kamae, how they apply their work from their kamae, based on how they kind of throw their kamae. So, and this is a gross generalization. I mean, there is just as much difference as there is similarity between the variant schools of fencing from Japan and abroad, of course. So take it with a grain of salt. It's just some observations, right? So typically, if the sort of more forward a person's hands are, the more their work is intent on sort of cleaving into the other person's space, using their position in that same way we talked about using Chudan aggressively, as a means of really just driving into the guy's signal, right? In contrast, right, the more reserved, the sort of higher in a way the sword sword and arms are, right? Reserved, obviously less reserved, right? The more they're basically creating space, they're forcing the opponent to come closer to them, right? Because if I'm here, the opponent only has to come far enough to take Coquille my wrist, right? Because obviously, once they pop that, it's they've probably taken the advantage, right? So when you start drawing the sword back and away, now they start having to come in much closer to work on you. So this is just as much a means of protecting that arm as a means of forcing them to cover more distance, or allowing you to cover more distance in before you have to start worrying about what sort of kind of sneaky ninja bullshit they're going to play on you to get out of getting whacked. But like I said, take it with it. So, towards the camera, right? I'm in that shoot-on position, and I push, pull, and drop. Again, ear and hand, lead hand, are next to each other. The sword is at about 45 degree. 45 degree angles are really commonly used in Hyoho because they tend to be right around the sweet spot where human depth perception begins to fail a little bit. We talked about contrast and how, contrast is the major element of sight. But once we've identified a thing, we want to start to measure it, right? And the way we measure it is not, again, by itself as an object just alone in space. It's in contrast to the things around it. In other words, our subconscious is really good at guesstimating distance by looking at things near it. So, if I'm holding my sword out here, you go, okay, well, this is probably something like 2.5 feet, or if this dude's like 6 feet tall, then he's like 3 feet from the hips, and your mind does this kind of, acrobatic geometry, so to speak, bouncing from one object that's near to another object that's near, and trying to get a real sense for what kind of size this object is. Now, in this kind of view, it's not so important, but here it becomes a lot more important because it helps you to judge how close the person is to hitting you, what their step distance is, what they need to be able to do to work you and sort of when you have to work. So at 45 degrees, right, it becomes much more difficult to accurately measure because the sword is not in such a distorted position that your mind goes, screw it, I'm just going to assume that it's this distance based on this dude's relative height. Or so up there and obviously go, okay, well I can right away measure it, I know right where the distance is going to be, right? You sucker them into trying to make a guess when they can't really easily measure it. We'll talk about this a lot more in Gedan, the low attitude. So, the important parts of this, right? One is the idea of driving. In the Kiai video, we talked about seme as a positive pressure, but also as a negative pressure. And the movement into Hasso is a really excellent example of that. So, when most people go into Hasso, they do so by bringing the hand back to whatever sort of position their style, advocates for, right? This motion, imagine that the room around you is filled with water, and this is, of course, a big object in that water. What happens is it moves away. It creates a vacuum, and the water sort of rushes in and fills that vacuum, right? So, just as it creates a positive force, it creates a negative force on the other side, in yoga, right? So, in fencing, this kind of thing happens a lot, especially when you're in command of the dude and he gets startled and starts reacting based on fear. he'll create these voids, and you can watch this in Kindle matches too. The person who comes and sucks back like that is almost immediately hit right away, right? Which is why you don't see it real commonly in sort of the higher level tournaments, because everybody knows the game at that point and they're really just in there. So in Hyoho, this is not something we want to do. This is, while we create negative spaces like this, we don't do it with Hasso. Because it is particularly dangerous to set yourself up with a desire to move one way and to move in the opposite direction of that. So you'll see this in Bato arts, right? They'll bring their sword in and they'll bring the sai up onto it. This is not only because there's a lot less flow room for you to just wrench through your softwood saya, but because at this point your sword is not in motion, which means that it can easily accelerate, or not easily, but it can accelerate forward without having to go back on itself. In contrary, if you were to do something like this, and the dude starts to attack you, you have to not only stop your motion in the opposite direction, but then you have to overcome that motion and draw on the other. In other words, it's real hard to go backwards and forwards. Obviously not impossible. You can see this in lots of other applications, open-handed implications, right? If the guy pulls back to hit first, he usually gets hit right then, because he's created that void, right? And he's just taking too long. Whereas the guy that just drives in straight forward, he's got a much better chance of hitting. So that driving in, that's what we were trying to do. So I said that we don't create a negative space, and that was not fully accurate. We create a negative space, but it's a negative space on our side that we fill into. So here I am. I'm going to try and align my kisaki up with the tip of this so you can kind of see the distance that I'm covering, right? And I drive in, right? So I drive into the guy's face. I'm coming under his chin. He knows that I'm moving in. He's getting that sense of pressure. He knows that he should probably do something, whether it's parry, whether it's retreat, whether it's reposition. What he does is not so important, honestly. This tip back, this throwing the tip in front of his face suddenly, is again another sort of psychological tack to drive him back from the face back. In other words, we never want the guy to deploy good tatsubaki, right? Because if he uses good body motion, for one, he can evade much faster. For two, he can usually work around our work and put it on us. And so we want to make him break his posture as much as possible. We want to startle him. We want to really just kind of make life rough for him. So we get that drive, we get that spook, and this is that negative space, right? Our sword is moved from it, and we suck into it. Right? So that we are mostly stepping up into the sword, rather than bringing the sword to us. We push forward, positive pressure that way. As this leaves, it creates negative pressure. Whoop. And we fill into that. Right? This is a really easy way to study this sort of positive application of seme. Because even your training partner, right, when you're on point, they're still kind of forced to react to it. So, once more, little step, little tip, hook, and back. Easy as pie. That's Hasso no kamae with the long sword. The upper attitude, the short sword. So, in the seven kodachi waza, the short sword techniques, kata, that Coquille uses, none of them use an upper attitude, right? Low attitude, judan, and variants like would you be mine? But none of them are up in the high guard. That does not mean that there is not a high position for the kodachi. The kodachi Hasso, right? Kodachi jodan, right? Is the same as if you had two hands. Exact same position, exact same motion, hand to the ear, answering the telephone, right? I think the reason that it is not in the katas so much is because of Musashi's view of the tactical use of the short sword as opposed to the long sword. So where the long sword kind of does everything medium, right? It's not really good at anything, it's not really bad at anything. You can use it in close, indoors, outside, in campaign, to defend castles, whatever. It's versatile, right? The short sword is not so much, right? Now the short sword is an amazing tool, but at least from Musashi's perspective, it had its place, and he likened it to small military units. So let's say that, we've got to go in here and take out this one dude. Obviously, we're not going to roll armor in, a big old division of tanks and APCs and take him that way, right? We're going to send in a small person. And in the same sort of counter way, if, the opposing force has, say, traditional Japanese view, if they have a large mass of cavalry, right, we're not going to send in like, oh, here's 12 archers, go to it, right? They're going to get plastered, right? So it's sort of a time and place type thing. Now again, this is Musashi's strategy, and it doesn't necessarily, in fact, it doesn't really represent a lot of other people's strategies at all. So we tend to think of the short sword in terms of using it to put people at ease, kind of, right? We want to bring them in more, because our main disadvantage with the short sword is length of our tool, right? If he's got 28 inches of blade and I've got 14 inches of blade, I'm obviously a full step behind him. Now my strength with the short sword is that I'm a lot more powerful in controlling and suppressing my opponent in terms of direct contact. So there's a lot of suppressive work, a lot of driving work, a lot of pinning and grappling work that we do with the short sword. And to do that, we got to get the guy to come in close, right? Because if he's standing out there, walk your shit, right? It's going to be hard for me to come in and be like, I'm going to grapple you, right? It just doesn't work out so well. So, but, of course, adapt to your situation. It may be that, you want to work on this guy, Chudon's not going to work because he's got a longer weapon. Maybe Gaedon doesn't work for some reason, and you're in a tight space, so you can't go either side. Don't be afraid to come up to Jodan, and really come in there and work the guy, right? So, the high guard with the kodachi. The upper attitude, two swords, right? To do the upper attitude with two swords, what we'll do is, again, we'll start off in that shoot-on position. Now, in the same way as with Hasso, we drive in, but this time, just the long sword moves, right? So we drive, whoop. Again, 45 degrees, hands by the ear. Your short sword is out here, it holds the center. And as you'll see in the Nito Seho, the two sword katas, once we start working in there, the short sword's primary job is to provide an obstacle for the opponent to have to work through. We're using it to sort of shape the space, and Jodan is kind of one of the two really good examples of that in Migi wa Kamae. So, if I'm up in this position, if he wants to work on me, he's got to, if he wants to come to my center line, clear the sword out, bah, right? Or, it's very dangerous for him to come to my lead side. Not only are sort of both my weapons pointed there, but my body can't is often bladed that way. Just a bit. Right. So it's easier for me to work on the side that is traditionally harder to work on. We'll get into that later. So he has to clear to come to the center, or he has to come to the outside. So we've taken kind of all the directions that he could have traveled and narrowed them down to two reasonable choices and one really bad one. And it's that kind of shaping that kamae is particularly useful for, especially when you're working against only one guy. It's a lot harder to shape the kamae, the way you relate in terms of distance and timing and space to a dude if there are more than one person. If you're using just your kamae, and you tend to use your taitsubaki more for those types of situations. We'll probably do a whole video just on Kyoho's work against multiple opponents, since it's not part of the kata syllabus, but that'll be down the road a bit. So, once more, Chudan, little step, drive, little slide, up to the air, right? Ba. Just that simple, just that easy. Some common errors with the Jodan position. The high guard position. The main one is, of course, accidentally sort of creating that negative space. So even though my tip kind of rolls, it's, I don't know if you can, it's obvious that you're creating more negative space on their side. You're drawing them in your attack. And again, if this is your intention, then it's a great thing. If it's not your intention, then it's very detrimental to the overall success of the work. So really getting that drive in, right? You should really just fill the place where your sword was a moment ago. And you can work from low positions or side positions, or you can just sort of work directly, as you like. It's a really simple position. There's not a lot to get horribly wrong with it once you understand kind of the pressure differential. With the Nito, the two swords, what you'll occasionally see is a person will go up, they'll bring this up, but they'll bring their tip real off the center line. They open that entry line, and then it can be a little bit easier for the dude to sort of come in, especially if he's got a sneaky ninja skill for that. Or if he's from a style that does a lot of bind work, blade on blade grappling, like Kashin Shinu, for example. They do a lot of work like that. So, as you drive, keep that really on the center line of your chest. In the beginning, a lot of people have trouble coming way too far back with Hasso. This is kind of a minor error. I mean, obviously, 45 is best because we're having that one more piece of work to confound them. And sometimes, for whatever reason, as people come up, they'll really start to stretch out their arms wide. This may be confusion and misunderstanding of some of the kata aspects later, because often uchidashi, the bad guy of the kata, will raise his arm out and provide a safe cutting target. But again, that's kind of part of the inbuilt safety of the kata. It's not a doctrine, right? So we want to keep that same close, closed, not showing space between our arms position that we had in Shudon, right? So as I come up, right, I want to be in my form. Now I am not intentionally sucking in deep. Some styles will really come in quite tight here. But I'm also not letting it just flap out wide on accident. Now there are times when you can employ this intentionally to draw an attack, and that's more of what you're supposed to get from the safety side of the kata. But we'll have a long discussion about kata, how it teaches, and its sort of stages that it goes in, and why we still use it as a training method. Funny story time, right? So, way back when, my teacher had hooked up with the soke, the inheritor then of Kyoho, and that's how he sort of started his study group up at the university. Well, the guy comes in. Actually, this might not have been the. Sorry, derailed a little bit. Anyway, a teacher, whether it was Yaido or Kyoho, came up and he was having trouble, getting the people he was teaching to get good teidouchi, right? They just had trouble getting that triangle bone over the back. So what he had them do was to literally wring their wrists so they could see through them, right? And of course, this is just so that they can get the feel. The idea is that, as they become more relaxed and they listen and they can actually hold it with good teidouchi to strike. Well, a couple years later, he comes back, and what are all the students doing? Right? This big open spot. So, I mean, it's another good example of how a lot of times the simple teaching tricks that we use to express these sometimes simple, sometimes quite complex concepts in fencing can go awry, right? And the students can really just take them off on this really bizarre tangent. So, if you are an instructor and you're watching this, you've got your own system or whatever that you're part of. Just give a little thought, because these things really, really sort of stick with people. Same thing with sort of ko chiburi, that was going around the Ido circles in Britain for so long. Anyway, so that is pretty much it for the upper attitude. It's real simple. Just get that feeling of driving into the guy's space, right? You want to take control of the situation. You want to be proactive. You want to hit him first. You want to hit him last, right? And really not give him a chance to show off any of his cool moves, right? Really, if you want to understand how to drive a person with this, you gotta pick up a sword and go train.